Okay, let's say Putin is not on the bench in The Hague, but in absentia, the trial is going on. When can we expect the results of these trials and courts? The resolutions?
Well, the International Criminal Court does not try people in absentia. So that's why we will not see any progress in the case unless Putin appears in The Hague in person.
Are you telling me that this is absolutely impossible to change the procedure? Is that any way that we can change? Because this is an extraordinary case. The war in the middle of Europe has been started by Vladimir Putin and his close allies. And now you're telling me that in their absentia, we cannot just try them. Maybe there is a way to change the whole architecture of ICC for this case specifically.
Well, I think to change the Rome Statute, especially not being a member of the Rome Statute, is unrealistic. And it also requires consent of very many members of the state. On the other hand, creating this special tribunal for prosecution of specifically crime of aggression can give us more flexibility. And there we could argue that given that it's difficult to get access to these persons who are responsible, we can proceed to trying them in absentia. With regard to the timeline, it's difficult to say, but one important development is, for example, creation of International Center for Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression in The Hague recently in July, where prosecuting authorities from different countries that are member of the joint investigating teams are working together to safeguard evidence of the crime of aggression. And as soon as there is a proper forum, including an international forum for prosecution of these crimes, they will be able to share this evidence. So I think that's important. We are not waiting until there is a political will for the creation of this tribunal. States are already working on the safeguarding and collecting the evidence and exchanging the evidence on the matter. And that's very important for the criminal trial.
It really is. Absolutely. But some countries probably just fear Vladimir Putin. Like the BRICS summit, they ask him not to come because otherwise they will be cornered. What to do? To arrest him, to arrest Vladimir Putin, do you believe this is going to happen? Like in Africa, what countries do you believe have a power, political will, and enough political will to get a hold of him, to arrest him?
Well, I think the European countries have stated that they would be ready to arrest him, but of course he is not going to travel to the European countries.
Well, that would be kind of a Hollywood scenario for me, like when Vladimir Putin goes to, for example, to Germany, and Germany would find a reason to not arrest him because it's easier, isn't it?
Yes, it's easier, and that's why we are talking about a political will. States do not always comply with international law. States that are now advocating for the responsibility of Russia and responsibility of Putin have in the past not complied with international law, and we are talking sometimes about the, the Western states. So it is very much related to states' interests, and this is something that we Ukrainians have also to, in a way, bear responsibility for now, because African states are not supporting the Ukrainian initiatives because we are supported by Western states, because African states have this traumatic experience of imperialism, and we have to be explaining to them now, we are suffering also from Russian imperialism, just like you were suffering. So the situation on the world arena is very complex now, and there is a lot of explaining to do to show why Ukrainians deserve and should be provided with this right for justice.
Maybe Ukraine should put some force, some impetus to not just explaining. What I mean is, all right, let's put Putin aside for a moment. What about the collective responsibility of the Russian nation? Because what they did is they raised a Tsar, they raised a Soviet dictator, and they gave him the keys to the castle. Like, do whatever you want. And they say, we are out of politics. But as Mr. Churchill said, if you're out of the politics will come to you at some point, and that's exactly what happened. What are the ways, the legal ways to, let's call it punishment, all right? The crime and the punishment. To punish the country, the nation, for what they did, for raising a dictator.
that's a difficult question, because we don't have the concept of collective punishment of people in law. We can talk again about the responsibility of Russia as a state, Russia as an entity that in a way is representative of that people, can bear responsibility for that. And the reaction of international community, the sanctions, the help for Ukraine, the support for Ukrainian initiatives, in a way shows that Ukraine is on the right side of international law, whereas Russia as a state is on the wrong side of international law here.
Well, if talking about Germany was demolished after the war. And then came the reparations. And most of the Russians just, they can, it's like what is happening in Ukraine is like an abstract thing. It started, and maybe for some reason, somewhere in time, it will just end. And then we will live our normal lives. What I am asking, is there a way to make them pay for it? Reparations, to a constant reminder, anything to make the nations responsible, to feel responsible for what they did. So in the future, maybe somebody will think twice before raising another tar.
Again, there are talks about reparations that Russia has to pay, Russia as a state. We're talking about the creation of the register for reparations for war crimes and damages caused by the war. I think also, in a way, the world has moved on from this idea of collectively punishing the whole nation. Again, we punish individuals who we can prove that they have committed crimes, or we have a responsibility for a state as an entity. But more generally, I think in future Russians, they will suffer a lot, and they're already suffering given the place that they hold in the world, in the eyes of the world, right, for what their state has been doing to other states. And not only in Ukraine, we're talking about the crimes committed in Africa, in Syria, etc. And in future, just as Germans, I think Russians will have a lot of work to do to repair their standing in international society, as well as to do some, I hope, reckoning with all the atrocities and crimes that have been committed by their forefathers or by themselves in Ukraine.
Well, I understand you, Gayane, absolutely, but I don't agree with you. I don't think that, all right, I mean, we don't have any leverage. We don't have, the judiciary system of the world, the ICC and so on, is absolutely not ready. And it's old, and it reacts not fast enough. And the system of security, the architecture of world security has to be amended in some way to react faster on challenges like Vladimir Putin and his aggression in Ukraine. But maybe I can agree to the thing that the nation should not be punished. But when I see Russians in Russia saying that they are a great nation and they're doing the right thing in Ukraine, because I've been in Bucha, I've seen things, and they say it's Ukrainian army did that. Maybe there is no way to punish them. And how can you reckon with the things like saying, I'm sorry, at least nothing is like that happening in Russia. So unfortunately, I don't think that Russia will ever change as it is as an entity, as a nation. So I think that Ukraine would have to be, from now on, alert, in an alarmed position forever. And this is why they would probably have to have the strongest army in the world. And I wish it is the case.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that the current situation, or the law is not the only answer to the current situation. So you don't win wars with the law and international treaties and international courts. You win wars with weapons and strength, and to be safe in future, Ukraine needs absolutely to become a militarily strong country. But law, justice process, reparation is part of the process of establishing peace, of reconciling with the trauma of the war, etc. So I think justice is an important process. It's not perfect. I agree with you that, for example, the UN system, especially when it comes to Security Council, is outdated and does not reflect the need of the current world. But I still believe in the justice, and even more so, I believe in Ukraine as a state that aspires to be a nation based on human rights and respect for rule of law. And for that reason, we are not talking about collective punishment, because we are not generalizing people in the way that Russia is generalizing us. So we are not becoming them.
This is a good point.
For us as well.